Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we tackle a topic suggested by you, our listeners, and really dig into it.
Yeah, we sift through everything out there to pull out the most important stuff, the most interesting bits.
Exactly. It's kind of a shortcut to getting up to speed, maybe with a few surprises along the way.
Keeps things interesting.
So today, we're diving deep into Nikola Tesla. We've looked at a whole lot of information available.
A huge amount, yeah.
And the goal here is to give you a solid but still engaging picture of the man, his inventions, the times he lived in.
And some of the, let's say, unexpected things about him, too.
Right. There's more to the story than just the famous image.
For sure. Okay, so basics first. He was born July 10th, 1856.
In what's now Croatia, right? Part of the Austrian Empire back then.
Exactly, an ethnic Serb family. His dad, Milutin, was an Eastern Orthodox priest. Quite intellectual, apparently.
And his mother, Uuka, she sounds like she was a major influence too, maybe in a less formal way.
Oh, absolutely. Georgina, or Uka, she didn't have formal schooling, but was incredibly inventive.
Yeah.
And she had this amazing memory, especially for Serbian epic poems.
Wow.
Tesla himself gave her credit for his own, eidetic memory and creativity.
So it ran in the family. He had siblings too.
He did, 4.
Mm.
But his older brother, Dane, died young in a horse riding accident. That apparently hit Tesla hard.
And his schooling.
Early education locally, then high school in Karlovac. Classes were in German.
Okay. And that's where the interest in electricity started.
Yeah, his physics professor did these demonstrations that just, captivated him. And he was already showing signs of being brilliant.
Like doing integral calculus in his head, that's not typical.
Not at all. He finished high school in just 3 years. But then, he got cholera right after graduating. Nearly died.
Oh, wow. But that led to a promise from his father, didn't it?
It did. His dad promised him if he recovered, he'd go to engineering school, which wasn't the original plan.
A real turning point then.
Huge. He recovered, dodged the draft for a bit by hiding out in the mountains.
Which he said made him stronger.
Yep. Then off to the Imperial Royal Technical College in Graz. Did really well at first, got commendations.
But he didn't actually graduate.
No. The story gets a bit murky. Maybe gambling debts, maybe something else. He left.
Okay. So not exactly a straightforward path.
Not really. He worked as a draftsman for a while in Maribor. Then his father nudged him towards Prague.
Did he study there?
He audited lectures at Charles Ferdinand University, mostly philosophy, but didn't properly enroll. Language issues, apparently.
Right.
After his father died, he ended up in Budapest, working at the telephone exchange. That was under Tivadar Puskas.
And he did well there.
Yeah, became chief electrician. He even claimed he improved the telephone repeater, though, interestingly, he never patented it.
So already tinkering and improving things, even before hitting the big time.
Definitely getting practical experience. This whole field was just exploding at the time.
Which leads him to Paris and then America.
Exactly. 1882, he's with the Continental Edison Company in Paris, installing electric lighting systems all over Europe, gaining really valuable hands-on experience.
And designing better equipment, too.
Yeah, improved dynamos, motors. His talent was noticed. Charles Batchelor, one of Edison's managers, saw his potential and brought him over to New York in 1884.
Okay, so now he's at the famous Edison Machine Works, the start of that whole Edison-Tesla dynamic.
Right. He was put to work troubleshooting, improving Edison's DC generators. There's a story about him fixing the generators on the SS Oregon incredibly quickly.
Impressing Edison himself, supposedly?
Supposedly got a rare compliment, yeah. He was also asked to design an arc lamp street lighting system.
But those designs never got used.
Nope, never produced. And then just 6 months in, he leaves Edison.
Why? What's the story there? The money dispute.
That's the most common story. Tesla claimed Edison offered him a huge bonus, like $50,000, if he could dramatically improve the DC generators.
Which he did.
He said he did. But then, according to Tesla, Edison just laughed it off, saying it was American humor.
Ouch. Whether that's exactly how it went down or not, he clearly left feeling hard done by.
His diary entries suggest he was pretty disillusioned, yeah. So he was out on his own.
Trying to get his own ideas funded must have been tough.
Really tough at first. He focused on patenting his arc lighting system. He partnered up with a couple of guys, Robert Lane and Benjamin Vail.
Forming the Tesla Electric Light Manufacturing Company.
That's the one. In 1885, he got his first U.S. patents for an improved DC generator. Even installed a system in Rahway, New Jersey.
Okay, some progress.
But here's the kicker.
Yeah.
His investors. They weren't interested in his ideas about alternating current, AC.
Which was his real passion, his big idea.
Exactly. So they eventually formed a new company without him, leaving him with nothing. No money, No control over his own patents.
Wow. Back to square one, basically.
Worse than square one.
Yeah.
He ended up doing manual labor, digging ditches, just to make ends meet.
That's incredible, a real low point. But it sets up the comeback, right? The focus on AC.
It really does. This is where things start to turn. In 1886, he connects with Alfred S. Brown and Charles Fletcher Peck.
New backers.
Yes. And crucially, they believed in his AC ideas. They backed him, formed the Tesla Electric Company in 1887.
And he gets a lab in Manhattan.
And that's where he develops the AC induction motor. This was the game changer. It used polyphase current.
Polyphase current creating a rotating magnetic field. That was the breakthrough.
Absolutely. He said the idea came to him years before, like in a vision. But this motor, patented in May 1888, it was self-starting.
And no commutator. That messy sparking part in DC motors.
Gone. Polyphase current gives it this smooth, continuous rotational force. It was elegant, efficient, a massive leap.
And this gets noticed by George Westinghouse. He was already championing AC.
Big time. Peck and Brown got Tesla to demo the motor for the American Institute of Electrical Engineers in '88. Westinghouse's people were there.
And they saw its potential immediately.
Instantly. This was the missing piece for a truly practical, large-scale AC system. So July 1888, Westinghouse licenses Tesla's motor and transformer designs.
A big deal for Tesla financially.
Huge. A lump sum plus royalties. And Westinghouse hired him as a consultant, brought him to Pittsburgh.
So now he's working within the Westinghouse system. Were there challenges?
Oh, yeah. Internal disagreements about the best way to implement AC. They eventually went with Tesla's preferred 60-cycle standard, which we still use.
But the motor wasn't perfect for everything, like streetcars.
Right. They found his induction motor at that stage wasn't quite right for things like streetcars. They stuck with DC motors for that application for a while.
Okay. And all this is happening against the backdrop of the war of currents. Edison versus Westinghouse. DC versus AC.
A fierce fight. Edison was pushing DC hard, even using some pretty negative tactics to paint AC as dangerous. Thomson Houston was another big player in the mix.
High stakes for control of the future of electricity.
Absolutely. Then came the financial panic of 1890. That hit Westinghouse hard.
And the lenders started demanding cuts.
Yeah, major pressure. And one of the things they targeted was the royalty payments owed to Tesla. They were significant.
This must have put Westinghouse in a really tight spot.
It did. And this is where Tesla does something pretty remarkable.
He gives up the royalties.
He does. He tore up the royalty agreement. He believed so strongly in AC, he basically sacrificed a potential fortune to ensure Westinghouse could keep developing it.
That's loyalty. Or maybe just supreme confidence in his system.
Probably a bit of both. He knew AC was the future. Later on, Westinghouse bought his patents outright for a lump sum as part of a deal with GE.
So AC wins the war, largely thanks to Tesla's tech and sacrifice. He's now independent again, has some money, sets up new labs in New York.
Right. And this is where he really starts experimenting with high-frequency, high-voltage electricity. He learns about Heinrich Hertz's work.
Hertz showing electricity could travel as waves through the air.
Exactly. And Tesla thinks, okay, how can I generate really powerful versions of that? This leads to his oscillating transformer.
The Tesla coil. The iconic invention.
That's it. Patented in 1891, it uses an air gap, not a solid core like regular transformers, to produce incredibly high voltages at high frequencies.
It's the goal, just making big sparks.
Well, the sparks were spectacular, but it was fundamental research for him. It was key to his next big ambition, wireless power.
Ah, right. Transmitting electricity without wires?
He was already experimenting with that using inductive and capacitive coupling. He did these amazing public demos.
Lighting up bulbs held in his hand, things like that.
Exactly. Lighting Geissler tubes, incandescent bulbs, no connections. Visually stunning.
But hard to make practical on a large scale.
Very difficult for power transmission that way. But it fueled his imagination. In 1893, he's talking about sending messages wirelessly across the globe, even sending power through the Earth itself.
Ahead of his time, he was getting recognition too, right? Vice president of the AIE?
Yes, respected by his peers. And then came the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, the Columbian Exposition.
A huge showcase for AC.
Massive. Westinghouse lit the whole fair, using AC, specifically branding it the Tesla polyphase system. His motors were running exhibits. He did his wireless lighting demos there.
So this was AC's big public debut, proving it was safe and effective?
Absolutely. It was a triumph. He also showed off his Egg of Columbus trick.
Using the rotating magnetic field to make a copper egg stand on end.
Yeah, a brilliant, simple demonstration of the principle behind his motor.
He also showed a steam-powered oscillator at the fair. Another AC generator design.
You did, trying to find simpler ways to generate AC. It wasn't really a practical success in the long run, though.
And then the Niagara Falls project, a huge undertaking.
Monumental. Edward Dean Adams, heading the project, consulted Tesla.
And Tesla recommended
A two-phase AC system, which favored Westinghouse's technology. So Westinghouse built the generators, GE handled the distribution. AC power on an unprecedented scale.
solidifying AC as the standard. But despite these successes, Tesla's own company, the Nikola Tesla company, struggled financially.
Yeah, founded in '95 to market his patents, but it had money problems. And then disaster struck.
The lab fire, 1895.
A huge blow.
Yeah.
His South Fifth Avenue lab burned down, destroyed almost everything. Notes, models, equipment, stuff from the World's Fair. Years of work gone.
Devastating, but he rebuilt.
He did. Showed incredible resilience. Set up a new lab on East Houston Street.
And around this time, he's also looking into strange new rays, X-rays.
He was. He noticed damage on photographic plates in his lab, called it radiant energy.
Yeah.
He might have accidentally taken an X-ray image even before Röntgen's official discovery.
Trying to photograph Mark Twain, supposedly.
That's the story. He developed his own type of vacuum tube to produce these rays, realized they could be hazardous, though he wasn't quite right about why initially.
Fascinating. And then, just before the turn of the century, radio control.
1898, he demos a radio-controlled boat, called it a teletomaton.
Wow. Like a drone boat, basically.
Pretty much. He showed it off Madison Square Garden, even pitched it to the U.S. military as a remote-controlled torpedo.
Were they interested?
Not really, not at the time, but it was an incredible demonstration of wireless control technology.
So he's achieved AC power dominance, invented the Tesla coil, explored X-rays, pioneered remote control. What's next? Even bigger ambitions.
Oh yeah, global wireless power. This became his obsession from the 1890s through about 1906.
Building on the wireless lighting stuff.
Exactly. He envisioned a system to transmit power anywhere on Earth, no wires needed, and worldwide wireless communication too.
A truly grand vision. But he disagreed with how radio waves worked, didn't he? Compared to someone like Marconi.
Fundamentally, he thought Hertz's theory was incomplete. He didn't think those kinds of radio waves were efficient for sending power long distances.
So what was his approach?
He believed you could transmit electricity through the Earth and the upper atmosphere. He even talked about using balloons high up with electrodes, a very different concept from Marconi's radio waves beaming through the air.
This led him to Colorado Springs, building a special lab there.
Yep, in 1899. High altitude to study atmospheric electricity, low-pressure air conductivity. John Jacob Astor V helped fund it.
And he did some spectacular experiments there.
Legendary stuff. Huge Tesla coil, creating massive artificial lightning bolts, studying natural lightning.
And this convinced him the Earth could conduct electricity easily.
That was his conclusion, yeah. Though, turns out it wasn't quite correct in the way he imagined. He also reported hearing strange signals there.
The potential extraterrestrial signals.
He speculated about that, but it's much more likely he was picking up atmospheric noise or maybe early radio experiments by others, perhaps even Marconi.
Interesting. Okay, so Colorado Springs informs his next big, ambitious project, Wardenclyffe.
Wardenclyffe, on Long Island, started around 1901. This was meant to be at the first transmitter for his global wireless system.
For both communication and power.
That was the plan. J.P. Morgan provided the initial funding, mainly interested in wireless communication to compete with Marconi.
But Tesla's vision was bigger.
Much bigger. He kept expanding the plans, wanting it to transmit power too. Then Marconi sends his first transatlantic radio signal in 1901.
And Morgan gets cold feet.
Pretty much. Morgan refused more funding. Tesla ran into huge financial problems, bad press. The project just ground to a halt by 1906.
And the tower was eventually torn down.
Sadly, yes. A huge unfinished dream. But Wardenclyffe still represents that incredible, audacious vision of a wirelessly powered world.
A massive disappointment for him, surely. Did he keep inventing after that?
He did, but things were tougher. Money was a constant issue. He kept working, though. Developed a bladeless turbine, for instance.
The bladeless turbine, how did that work?
Used smooth discs spinning in a casing relying on fluid viscosity and adhesion. Pretty clever. He demonstrated it, tested it at a power station, worked with Alice Chalmers.
Did it take off?
Not really, not as a major power source.
Yeah.
It found some niche uses, like in speedometers, but wasn't the revolution he hoped for.
He was also involved in patent lawsuits around radio.
Yeah, during the World War I era, he's a witness in a case involving Marconi. He tried suing Marconi himself for patent infringement, but it didn't go far initially.
But didn't the Supreme Court eventually rule in his favor, sort of?
Much later, yes. A 1943 decision did restore some of Tesla's earlier wireless tuning patents, acknowledging his priority over Marconi in certain aspects, but that was after Tesla died.
And what about the Nobel Prize story? The rumor he might share it with Edison in 1915.
Ah, yes. There were newspaper reports suggesting they might share the physics prize, but it went to the Braggs for X-ray crystallography.
So the rumors of one of them refusing it because of the other? Probably just rumors.
Almost certainly unsubstantiated. Neither Tesla nor Edison ever won a Nobel.
Still, he got other awards, right? And kept having ideas.
Oh, plenty of medals and honors over the years. And yes, ideas kept flowing. Some practical, like trying to market ozone generators. Some, less so.
Like using electricity to boost students' intelligence.
Yeah, that was one theory. Never tested, obviously. He also talked about using electric rays to find submarines.
An early radar concept.
Kind of, but his understanding of how radio waves travel through water was flawed. He even patented a design for a VTOL aircraft, a biplane.
Vertical takeoff and landing. Way ahead of its time, but probably not workable then.
Highly impractical with the technology of the day, yeah.
And personally, these later years were difficult financially.
Very much so. He ended up living in a series of New York hotels, often leaving behind unpaid bills. It's quite sad, really.
And he developed this famous affinity for pigeons.
Became a defining characteristic. He fed them daily in the parks, brought injured ones back to his hotel room to care for them. He had a special bond with one particular white pigeon.
That's quite poignant. Did he get any financial help later on?
Yes. Starting in 1934, Westinghouse Electric actually began paying him a monthly consulting fee and covered his rent at the Hotel New Yorker.
Out of genuine concern, or just to avoid bad PR about their famous former associate living in poverty?
Probably a mix of both, honestly. But it provided him some stability.
And then there were the birthday press conferences. He started holding those annually.
We did, from his 75th birthday onwards. They became quite the event. He'd talk about his past work, his current ideas.
And some of those later ideas get pretty speculative.
Increasingly so. Things like cosmic ray motors, a whole new theory of energy, and of course the infamous death ray.
Teleforce, he called it. What was the idea there?
He claimed it was a particle beam weapon that could destroy airplanes from miles away, powerful enough to end all war. He described parts of it involving vacuum tubes and accelerating particles.
Did he ever build it?
No evidence he ever built a working prototype. He also claimed his earlier mechanical oscillator could trigger earthquakes or destroy buildings. These claims grabbed headlines, but seemed detached from practical reality by that point.
A mix of genius and maybe frustration or eccentricity in later life. How did his life end?
He died alone in his room at the Hotel New Yorker on January 7th, 1943. He was 86.
Cause of death?
Coronary thrombosis. He'd actually been hit by a taxi a few years earlier, in 1937, and refused medical help. That likely didn't help his overall health.
And his papers were seized by the government because of the war.
Yes. The FBI's alien property custodian seized his belongings. They were worried about the death ray plans falling into enemy hands.
But they were analyzed.
John G. Trump, an MIT professor, and Donald Trump's uncle, actually, analyzed them. He concluded there was nothing vital for the war effort, describing Tesla's recent ideas as highly speculative, philosophical, and not based on sound, workable principles.
Interesting. His funeral was a big affair, though.
Yes, Mayor LaGuardia read a eulogy. A state funeral was held at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. His body was cremated, and his ashes are now in the Nikola Tesla Museum in Belgrade.
And his biggest scientific honor came later, naming the unit of magnetic flux density after it.
It's Tesla, yeah. Adopted in 1960, a fitting tribute. His archive is also part of UNESCO's Memory of the World, and public fascination just keeps growing.
Let's talk a bit about him as a person. Lifelong bachelor.
Yep. He believed being celibate helped his scientific focus. He had some evolving, sometimes complex views on women's roles in society.
Was he easy to get along with?
Generally described as quite a social, preferred working alone. But people who did know him often spoke highly of his character's sweetness, sincerity, modesty. He could be critical too, though. Had strong opinions.
Did he have famous friends?
Mark Twain was a notable friend, visited his lab. Also Swami Vivekananda, which got him interested in Eastern philosophy.
And his own beliefs, physics, society, religion. He had some unconventional ideas there, too.
Definitely. On physics, he rejected atomic theory as we know it, didn't believe in electrons as we understand them. He clung to the idea of an all-pervasive ether.
He disagreed with Einstein, too.
Strongly. disputed relativity, the idea of curved space, claimed his own experiments showed things faster than light. He even talked about his own dynamic theory of gravity, but never published it.
What about society?
Some pretty controversial views there. He worried about human pity interfering with natural selection and actually advocated for eugenics.
Wow, okay. That's uncomfortable.
It is, from our perspective today. He also predicted women would eventually become the dominant sex. And he wasn't convinced the League of Nations was enough after World War I.
And religion, raised Orthodox Christian.
But later said he wasn't a believer in the Orthodox sense. He respected Buddhism and Christianity, but saw the universe more like a giant machine, with the soul being just the sum of bodily functions, opposed religious fanaticism.
He also wrote books and articles.
Yes, including his autobiography, My Inventions, and articles like The Problem of Increasing Human Energy. Gives insight into his thinking.
So wrapping this up, we've covered a huge amount of ground, from the AC system that powers everything,
To the Tesla coil, radio control, the dash dreams of Wardenclyffe, the Kirky later years.
It's an incredible story. His impact on the modern world via AC is just undeniable.
Absolutely fundamental. But his life shows that mix of groundbreaking success and later maybe reaching too far or perhaps just being misunderstood.
It does make you think. His early inventions were so practical, so world-changing. Then the later visions were so grand, almost fantastical. What might have been if Wardenclyffe had succeeded?
Or even if some of his other later ideas had a kernel of truth we haven't yet grasped. It's fascinating to ponder. His blend of vision and engineering is rare.
A truly unique figure. We've really just scratched the surface here. There's so much more to explore about Nikola Tesla. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Ever stopped to really look at silk? That incredible shimmer isn't just surface deep. It's all down to the tiny architecture of the silk fiber. Think of it like a microscopic three-sided mirror bouncing light around.
Like a prism, almost.
Exactly. And that's just the tip of the silken iceberg, a little taste of the surprising world we're about to explore.
That's right. Today we're plunging into the fascinating history and science of silk using a really comprehensive set of information. We'll be uncovering everything from its ancient origins and how it's made to the amazing properties that make it so unique and its surprisingly diverse applications.
So if you've ever wanted the quick route to being seriously in the know about silk, the kind of facts that make you go,
Yeah.
you're in the right place.
Yeah, oh boy.
We're on a mission to pull out the most captivating insights without getting lost in the weaving weeds, so to speak.
Good plan.
Okay, to kick things off, where does that elegant little word silk even come from?
Well, the journey of the word silk kind of mirrors the journey of the fabric itself.
Yeah.
It traveled from Old English, siolak, to the Latin sericum.
Okay.
And before that, the ancient Greek serikos, meaning silken. But its ultimate source is China, with the simple sound C.
See, interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note similar sounding words across Asia, like Manchurian serge and Mongolian sirkek, which really underscores how long and widely this material has been recognized.
A truly international word with roots stretching way, way back. And speaking of ancient, the story of silk in China is almost unbelievable in its timeline.
Absolutely. I mean, we've found evidence of silk protein, fibroin in soil from tombs in Jiahu, Heian,
Right?
dating back an astonishing 8,500 years.
8,500. Wow.
Yeah. To put that in perspective, that's before pottery was widespread in some regions.
Incredible.
And the oldest surviving piece of silk fabric, it was used to wrap a child around 3630 BC at a Yangshao culture site.
So we're talking over 5,500 years ago.
Exactly. That predates the construction of Stonehenge.
Just think about that. A fabric so delicate, lasting for millennia. And of course, there's the almost mythical story of how it was first discovered.
Ah, yes, the legend. The popular one credits its development to a Chinese empress, Li Zhu, also known as Shi Ling Shi.
Right.
Initially, silk was a closely guarded treasure, reserved solely for the emperors for their personal use and, as prestigious gifts.
Only for the top brass.
Pretty much. But slowly, it began to weave its way into broader Chinese culture and trade, both geographically and socially.
From the emperor's robes to something more accessible, a true symbol of luxury as it spread.
Definitely.
And it wasn't just about looking good, was it? It had practical applications, too.
Precisely. Its unique texture and sheen quickly made it a highly desired luxury item throughout areas accessible to Chinese merchants,
Okay.
becoming a cornerstone of pre-industrial international trade. But it also served as a writing surface, particularly during the Warring States period.
Writing on silk.
Yeah. Imagine a lightweight, absorbent material that held ink beautifully against a clear white background, perfect for important documents in the often damp climate of the Yangtze region.
It paints a picture of incredible refinement. And archaeologists have unearthed some truly remarkable finds that show just how sophisticated their early silk production was.
Oh, absolutely. What's particularly striking is the 2007 discovery of intricately woven and dyed silk textiles in a 2,500-year-old tomb in Jiangxi province. This pushed back the timeline for sophisticated silk production, revealing advanced weaving and dyeing techniques even earlier than the well-known finds at Mawangdui from the Han Dynasty.
So earlier than we thought.
Much earlier. It really makes you reconsider the technological advancements of that era.
So they were masters of silk production much earlier than we previously understood. And it sounds like they were keen to keep this expertise under wraps.
Well, very keen. The Chinese emperors certainly made efforts to maintain a monopoly on sericulture, the art of raising silkworms. But, secrets get out. The knowledge eventually traveled. It reached Korea around 200 BC, the ancient kingdom of Khotan by AD 50, and India by AD 140, often facilitated by technological exchange with China.
Despite their best efforts, the secret got out, and it ignited this massive global trade, didn't it?
Absolutely. In the ancient world, Chinese silk was the ultimate luxury commodity, driving trade across Eurasia. Civilizations like ancient Persia flourished, partly due to their role in this exchange, and of course it led to the legendary Silk Road.
The Silk Road.
A network not just for goods, but also for ideas and culture, all spurred on by this fiber.
It's amazing to think that this delicate thread played such a powerful role in connecting East and West. Now, the source also talks about wild silk. What's the difference there?
Right, wild silk. It's been harvested and used in China, the Indian subcontinent, and Europe since ancient times too.
Okay.
And it comes from different types of silkworms than the ones that feed on mulberry leaves, the Bombyx mori. However, it was always produced on a much smaller scale compared to the cultivated variety.
Why the smaller scale? Isn't it essentially the same thing?
Not quite. Wild silks tend to have more varied colors and textures, making them less consistent, less uniform.
Ah, okay.
Also, the cocoons are often gathered after the moth has emerged, which breaks the continuous silk filament into shorter pieces.
Right, so you don't get that long thread.
Exactly. Plus, many wild cocoons have this sort of mineral coating that makes it difficult to reel those long, unbroken strands that are ideal for weaving.
So less uniform and trickier to work with. That makes sense. But they still found ways to utilize it.
Oh, definitely. In regions where mulberry silk cultivation wasn't prevalent, people developed a more labor-intensive process called carding to spin the shorter wild silk fibers into textile.
Carding, okay.
And it's fascinating to see how resourceful people were. Some natural silk structures were used directly without any spinning at all.
Like what?
Well, for instance, spider webs were used as wound dressings in ancient Greece and Rome. Yeah, and even as a base for paintings in the 16th century. And in the Aztec Empire, they apparently even glued butterfly caterpillar nests together to create a sort of fabric.
Talk about ingenuity. So the commercial silk we're most familiar with is quite different then.
Exactly. Commercial silk comes from farmed silkworm pupa that had been specifically bred to produce a pure white silk thread without that mineral coating.
Bred for purpose.
Right. And, crucially, to ensure a continuous thread, the pupa are typically killed before they emerge as moths, usually through steaming or heating.
We'll probably come back to that point later.
Yes, it's a significant point, but allows the entire cocoon to be unwound in one long, unbroken filament, much stronger and easier to dye.
Makes sense for commercial production.
But what's really interesting now is the development of a demineralizing technique. It can remove that outer layer from wild silk cocoons,
Oh, interesting.
potentially opening up commercial possibilities for wild silk in regions where those moths naturally thrive, like parts of Africa and South America. It could be a real game changer for those economies.
That's a fascinating potential shift. Now, beyond China, where did silk production really take root around the globe? You mentioned Korea and India early on.
Right. The source details a really widespread adoption. In Japan, for example, archaeological evidence points to sericulture as early as the Yayoi period.
Wow, early there too.
Yeah, and it became a dominant industry in the mid-20th century. Japan even became a major silk exporter, competing with China for a time until World War II, and the rise of synthetic fibers led to a decline.
So Japan also had its era as a silk powerhouse. What about India? They're so well known for their beautiful silks.
India boasts a very long and rich history with silk, known as resham in the north and pattu in the south.
Mm-hmm.
Archaeological discoveries suggest sericulture during the Indus Valley Civilization around 2450–2000 BC, using wild silk threads back then.
Again, incredibly early.
It is. Today, India is the second largest silk producer globally, with significant production in states like Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Assam. Assam is particularly famous for its unique muga, eri, and pat silks, each with distinct characteristics.
Those regional variations sound fascinating. And what about Thailand? I always picture those vibrant, intricately patterned silks.
You're right, too. In Thailand, silk production is a year-round activity. Traditionally, women are the weavers, often on hand looms. And this skill can even be linked to marriage prospects in some communities. Thai silks are celebrated for their complex designs, often created by combining different threads, and they have a specific process of hand-reeling and bleaching the yarn before dyeing to achieve those brilliant colors.
It sounds like a deeply ingrained cultural tradition there. The source also mentions Bangladesh.
Yes, the Rajshahi region of Bangladesh is a key center for producing mulberry, Andi, and Tassar silk. And Bengali silk, which was known as Ganges silk in medieval Europe, was a major international trade item for centuries. Bengal was actually a leading exporter between the 16th and 19th centuries. It played a significant role in global textile trade.
So a real historical heavyweight in the silk trade. What about further west in Central Asia and the Middle East?
Well, the 7th century CE Afrasiab murals in Samarkand offer a glimpse into silk's importance. In Central Asia, they depict Chinese emissaries carrying silk and even silkworm cocoons.
Oh, wow. Visual evidence.
Exactly. In the Middle East, there's an interesting reference in the Torah to Shini Torah, often interpreted as crimson silk. It's also noteworthy that Islamic teachings generally discourage men from wearing pure silk, often associating it with femininity and extravagance.
Ah, okay.
Although there were discussions and exceptions for small amounts of silken garments.
That's a fascinating cultural nuance. And what about the ancient Mediterranean? Did the Greeks and Romans know about this luxurious fabric?
They did. There's a possible early mention in Homer's Odyssey, where a shirt is described as gleaming like the skin of a dried onion, which some believe could be a reference to silk sheen.
Huh. Interesting interpretation.
And Aristotle also mentioned coevestis, a wild silk textile from the island of Kos. The Roman Empire developed a significant trade in silk, with Chinese silk being the most highly prized luxury good.
Right, they imported it heavily.
They did. Emperor Tiberius even made a somewhat unsuccessful attempt to ban men from wearing it due to its perceived decadence.
Tried to legislate fashion.
Never works. Eventually, around AD 550, the secrets of silk production reached Europe through the Byzantine Empire. Silkworm eggs were reportedly smuggled into Constantinople.
Smuggled eggs. Talk about corporate espionage in ancient times.
Very much. And the Byzantines held onto that knowledge tightly, it sounds like. The best looms and weavers were concentrated within the Great Palace complex in Constantinople, producing exquisite silk fabrics for imperial use and diplomatic gifts.
A state secret, almost.
Absolutely. Any surplus was sold at very high prices, maintaining its exclusivity.
So, from a closely guarded secret in China to an imperial monopoly in Byzantium, what happened in medieval and modern Europe after that?
Well, Italy emerged as a major silk producer during the medieval period. You had thriving centers like Catanzaro, Lucca, Genoa, Venice, and Florence.
The Italian city-states.
Exactly. They even pioneered the development of water-powered silk throwing machines in Piedmont, which significantly boosted production. Spain, particularly Granada, was also significant until the expulsion of the Moriscos.
Okay.
Then France, with Lyon as its heart, became a key player from the 15th century onwards, really leading the way in mass production techniques.
Lyon silk, yes.
Even England made attempts, though initially with limited success. Later, they established centers in places like Stockport and Macclesfield, and even relied on silk for crucial materials like parachute fabric during World War II.
It truly became a global industry, didn't it? And what about North America? Did it ever take hold there?
Well, wild silk was utilized by the Aztecs. Silkworms were introduced to Oaxaca by the Spanish as early as the 1530s.
Really? That early?
Yeah. King James I of England made efforts to establish silk cultivation in the British colonies, though it didn't really flourish until the 19th century, with the rise of industrial centers in the Northeast.
Like where?
Places like Manchester, Connecticut, home to the Cheney brothers, and Paterson, New Jersey, which actually earned the nickname Silk City.
Silk City, NJ.
But then, the Second World War and the invention of synthetic alternatives like nylon had a major impact, leading to a decline in North American silk production.
The rise of synthetics changed everything.
It really did.
So even across the Atlantic, silk had its moments. The source also gives a brief mention of Malaysia and Vietnam.
Right. Malaysia imported silkworms as early as 1764, primarily for their beautiful songket fabric, but they apparently no longer engage in sericulture.
Okay.
Vietnam, though, has a rich legend of silk production dating back to the first millennium AD, and it continues to be woven there today, maintaining a long tradition.
It's incredible to follow this thread of silk through so many different cultures and across such vast stretches of time. Now, let's delve into the nuts and bolts, the actual production process, or sericulture. How does it all begin?
Right. The process starts with silk moths laying their eggs on specially prepared paper. These eggs hatch into larvae, the silkworms.
Caterpillars.
Exactly. And they have an insatiable appetite for fresh mulberry leaves. That's key mulberry leaves.
Got it.
Over about 35 days, they go through 4 molts, shedding their skin, and growing at an astonishing rate, becoming around 10,000 times heavier.
10,000 times. That's incredible growth.
Isn't it? When they're ready to pupate, they spin their cocoons, usually on a straw frame provided for them.
Okay.
Each silkworm moves its head in a figure-8 motion, extruding liquid silk from 2 glands through spinnerets near its mouth. This liquid silk is coated in a protein called sericin.
Sericin, right, the gluey stuff.
That's the one. It helps it solidify upon contact with the air. In just 2 to 3 days, a single silkworm can spin a filament that's about 1 mile long.
A mile?
Roughly a mile, yeah. And completely enclose itself in its protective cocoon.
That's amazing engineering.
It really is. Now, to harvest the silk, the cocoons are typically heated to kill the larvae inside. Though some are kept to allow the moths to emerge for breeding purposes.
Okay.
The harvested cocoons are then soaked in boiling water. This softens the sericin, allowing the continuous silk fibers to be carefully unwound.
So the boiling water is crucial.
It is, for softening that sericin. Because a single silk thread is incredibly fine, usually 3 to 10 of these filaments are spun together to create a commercially usable thread.
Right, combining them for strength. The source mentioned some numbers, like how many silkworms for a kimono?
Ah, yes. The scale is pretty staggering. It takes about 3,000 silkworms consuming over 100 kilograms of mulberry leaves to produce just 1 kilogram of silk.
Wow.
And for a single silk kimono, you might need the cocoons from around 5,000 silkworms.
5,000? That's a lot of worms for one garment. And who are the main producers today?
China is still the dominant producer, accounting for over half, around 54%, of the world's silk. India is second, with about 14%.
Okay. And I imagine all those mulberry leaves and the processing, it must have an environmental footprint.
It does. Compared to other natural fibers, especially plant-based ones, silk production has a relatively large carbon and water footprint. It's an animal-derived fiber, and raising the silkworms requires significant resources, particularly the mulberry cultivation.
Something to consider. Okay, so it's this incredibly labor-intensive process resulting in this amazing fiber. What are the key characteristics that make silk so unique, its properties?
Silk possesses a really remarkable combination of physical properties. The Bombyx mori silk fiber, the most common type, has a distinctive triangular cross-section.
The prism thing we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Only about 5 to 10 micrometers in width with slightly rounded corners. This unique structure, combined with the fibrine protein being primarily composed of beta sheets, sort of tightly packed, folded structures. That's what gives silk its characteristic shimmer. It refracts light in different directions.
So it's the shape and the protein structure.
Correct. And the shape of the cross-section can actually vary in silks produced by other types of silkworms. Raw silk consists of these primary filaments, called brin, held together by the sericin proteins, the bave.
Okay.
It's wonderfully smooth and soft to the touch, though not necessarily slippery depending on the weave, and is surprisingly strong for its fineness.
Strong, but does it have weaknesses?
It does lose some strength, maybe around 20% when it gets wet. It has good moisture regain, meaning it can absorb some moisture without feeling damp.
Good for clothing.
Very good. But it has only moderate to poor elasticity. If you stretch it, it tends to stay stretched.
Okay.
Also, exposure to sunlight can weaken the fibers over time, and if it's not kept clean, it can be susceptible to damage from insects like moths.
Right, got to protect your silks. You mentioned its strength. Is there a striking example of its durability?
Yes. There's a pretty amazing one. In 1840, perfectly preserved silk garments were recovered from a shipwreck that occurred way back in 1782.
Over 50 years underwater.
Yep. Remarkably, the silk had survived beautifully, while wool items from the same wreck had completely deteriorated.
That's an incredible testament to its durability. What other interesting physical characteristics does silk have?
Well, it's a relatively poor conductor of electricity, which is why silk garments can sometimes cling with static.
Oh, the static cling.
Right. However, it has a high emissivity for infrared light, meaning it radiates heat efficiently. This contributes to that cool feeling when you touch it.
Cool to the touch, literally.
Literally. Watch out for shrinkage, though. Unwashed silk chiffon can shrink quite significantly, maybe up to 8%, and even dry cleaning can cause some shrinkage, perhaps up to 4%.
Good to know. Can you fix it?
Interestingly, sometimes gentle steaming can help to reverse this shrinkage somewhat.
Okay.
Oh, and another quirky one. Both natural and synthetic silk proteins exhibit piezoelectric properties, meaning they can generate a small electrical charge when mechanical stress is applied, like squeezing them.
Weird.
Yeah. And historically, silkworm silk was so important, it actually served as the standard for the denier.
The measurement for fiber thickness?
Exactly. The linear density, silkworm silk is around 1 denier. Compare that to spider silk, which is often much finer, even though it can be incredibly strong.
So, strong yet incredibly fine, beautifully shimmery, cool to the touch, but prone to static and stretching. What about its chemical makeup? What's it actually made of?
Chemically, silk is primarily composed of 2 main proteins, fibroin and sericin. Fibroin provides the structural core, the strength of the fiber. Sericin is that more sticky outer layer that holds the fibroin filaments together in the cocoon.
The glue.
The glue, essentially. Fibroin has a repeating sequence of amino acids, mainly glycine, serine, glycine alanine.
Right.
These form those characteristic beta-pleated sheets we mentioned earlier, held together by hydrogen bonds. The high glycine content allows for very tight packing of the protein chains, which contributes to its strength, while alanine and serine add to its overall resilience and resistance.
And how does it react to chemicals?
It's generally resistant to most mineral acids, but sulfuric acid is a big exception. It will dissolve it.
Okay, noted.
Perspiration can cause it to yellow over time, unfortunately. And chlorine bleach is definitely a no-no. It's quite harsh and will damage or destroy the silk fibers.
So definitely a material that needs gentle care when it comes to cleaning. Now, the source also mentions something called regenerated silk fiber, RSF. What is that? Sounds futuristic.
It kind of is. Regenerated silk fiber is a really interesting development. It's made by chemically dissolving silkworm cocoons. But the trick is doing it carefully to preserve the intact molecular structure of the silk protein.
So you break it down but keep the core molecules whole?
Exactly. This dissolved silk solution is then processed into microfibrils and spun back into new fibers using a process called extrusion.
Like 3D printing of fiber?
Sort of, yeah. And what's quite remarkable is that this regenerated silk has been reported to be about twice as stiff as naturally spun silk.
Twice as stiff. That's a significant change in its properties. It sounds like it could open up a whole new range of potential uses.
It certainly could.
And speaking of uses, let's explore the incredibly diverse applications of silk. Where do we even begin?
Right. I mean, clothing is the obvious one. Silk's natural absorbency makes it comfortable in warm weather and during activity, while its low conductivity provides a degree of warmth in cooler weather.
Best of both worlds, almost.
Kinda, yeah. It's used in everything from everyday shirts and ties to exquisite formal dresses, delicate lingerie, pajamas, robes, sundresses, traditional Asian clothing. You name it.
And all those different types of silk fabric.
Oh, the variety is huge, each with its own unique texture and drape, like satin, charmeuse, habutai, chiffon, taffeta, crêpe de chine, dupioni, noil, tussa, shantung. The list goes on.
It's the go-to for anything that needs to look and feel luxurious.
Yeah.
But its applications extend far beyond fashion, don't they?
Absolutely. In furniture, silk's luster and beautiful drape make it a popular choice for upholstery, wall coverings, and window treatments, though often blended with other fibers for added durability in those uses.
Right, wear and tear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can also find it in elegant rugs, bedding, wall hangings, And then there are the more surprising industrial applications.
Like what?
Well, historically, parachutes were made of silk due to its strength-to-weight ratio.
Silk parachutes. That's a fantastic example of its strength and lightweight being put to practical use.
It is. Also, lightweight and strong bicycle tires have used silk casings, and it's been used as filling for comforters, and even as bags for artillery gunpowder because it burns completely without leaving residue.
Wow, gunpowder bags. Okay. And what about in medicine? You mentioned sutures earlier.
Yes. In medicine, silk that has had its outer sericin layer removed is used as non-absorbable surgical sutures. It's been used this way for a long time.
Okay.
While there have been suggestions for its use in treating conditions like atopic dermatitis, current research hasn't really shown a significant improvement there.
So maybe not for skin conditions.
Not proven yet. However, the field of biomaterials has seen a huge surge of interest in silk over the past few decades.
Biomaterials, what does that involve?
Well, besides sutures, which have been used since maybe the 2nd century CE, silk is now being extensively studied for its excellent mechanical strength, its biocompatibility.
Meaning it works well with the human body.
Exactly. Minimal negative reaction. Also, the ability to control how quickly it degrades or breaks down in the body, and its potential to carry and deliver things like growth factors to help tissues heal.
Okay, that's advanced stuff.
It is.
Yep.
It can be processed into a variety of formats: films, gels, microscopic particles, and even three-dimensional scaffolds for tissue engineering, like building a framework for new tissue to grow on.
So it's not just a passive material. It can actually play an active role in healing and rebuilding tissues within the body.
That's the goal. The fibroin protein from Bombyx mori silk, with its robust beta sheet structure, is particularly promising for applications like repairing damaged tendons, where strength is key. It can have a tensile strength up to 740 MPa, which is pretty high.
Impressive.
Interestingly, silks from different types of silkworms exhibit a range of mechanical strengths, allowing for tailored applications. The regenerated silk products often tend to be weaker than the natural fibers.
Right, and biocompatibility, is it perfectly safe?
That's a crucial area. The sericin protein, that outer layer, was initially believed to be the main cause of immune responses.
The glue again.
Yeah, so removing it, degumming, is considered essential. But the research is actually a bit conflicting on sericin's exact role. Fibrin itself seems pretty biocompatible in lab tests, similar to standard tissue culture plastic, and maybe even better than things like collagen or PLA in some animal studies.
So removing the sericin is key.
Proper degumming and sterilization are absolutely crucial, yes. There are still some long-term safety concerns in humans, beyond its established use in short-term sutures. And we also need to consider the biocompatibility of its breakdown products as it degrades in the body.
Right. What happens as it disappears?
Exactly. Different degradation products might trigger different responses.
And it is biodegradable.
Yes, that's another significant advantage. It can be broken down by biological agents like bacteria, fungi, or the body's own cells and enzymes like protease A50 or chymotrypsin,
Which
means it could minimize the need for follow-up surgeries to remove implants used in tissue engineering, for example. It just gradually disappears as the new tissue forms.
that's a huge plus.
Definitely. And unlike some synthetic biomaterials that can produce acidic byproducts as they degrade, silk doesn't seem to have that issue. Plus, you can actually control its strength retention and degradation rate to some extent by manipulating that beta sheet content during processing.
So you can tune it for the job.
Potentially, yes. And what's truly cutting edge now is the genetic modification of silkworms.
Modifying the worms themselves.
Yes. Scientists are exploring ways to alter the silk's protein composition, maybe creating even stronger or more functional silks. And even using silkworms as sort of biofactories to produce other valuable industrial or therapeutic proteins within the silk itself.
Genetically engineered silkworms producing pharmaceuticals, that's a concept straight out of science fiction becoming reality.
It's heading that way. It's really pushing the boundaries of material science and biotechnology.
Incredible potential there. Let's circle back to the more traditional side for a moment, though. Can you briefly walk us through the actual cultivation of silkworms again? We touched on it in production, but maybe the life cycle details.
Sure. So the journey begins with the silk moths laying their tiny eggs, usually on specially prepared paper.
Okay.
These hatch into equally tiny caterpillars, the silkworms.
Yeah.
Then comes the eating phase, voracious eating, primarily of fresh mulberry leaves.
Non-stop eating.
Pretty much. Over approximately 35 days, they undergo 4 molts, shedding their skin as they grow incredibly fast, increasing their weight by about 10,000 times, remember.
That number is still staggering.
It is. When they reach maturity, they're ready to spin their cocoons, They're typically placed on a straw frame or something similar,
Okay.
and each silkworm meticulously moves its head in that figure-8 pattern we talked about, extruding liquid silk from specialized glands through spinnerets located near their mouth.
Two streams,
Two
right?
streams of fibron coated in that sericin glue, which solidifies almost instantly upon contact with the air.
Okay.
In just 2 to 3 days, a single silkworm spins that continuous filament, about a mile long, completely enclosing itself inside.
A self-made house of thread.
Exactly. Then comes the harvesting step.
Okay.
To get that continuous thread, the cocoons are typically subjected to heat, usually steam or hot air, which kills the pupa inside.
Right.
A small percentage, of course, are kept aside and allowed to mature and emerge as moths to reproduce for the next generation of eggs.
Keeping the cycle going.
Right. The harvested cocoons are then soaked in boiling water. This softens the sericin glue.
Allows unwinding.
Exactly. It allows those long, continuous silk filaments to be carefully unwound. And because a single filament is so incredibly fine, several strands, usually 3 to 10, are spun together to create a commercial silk thread strong enough for weaving or other uses.
It's an amazing transformation from this tiny larva to this perfectly constructed cocoon and the miles of thread within. It really gives you a new appreciation for the process. Now, this process, the boiling to kill the larva, it does raise some animal rights questions, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It's a significant point of criticism for the silk industry. The fact that the process typically involves killing the silkworm larvae inside the cocoons by boiling or steaming them, well, it's drawn strong objections.
From groups like PETA.
Yes, PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, is quite vocal about it and urges consumers to avoid silk altogether for this reason. And it's not just modern groups. It's worth noting that Mahatma Gandhi was also critical of traditional silk production based on his philosophy of ahimsa, or nonviolence towards all living beings.
Ahimsa, right. So what was his alternative?
He promoted the use of cotton and also what's known as ahimsa silk, sometimes called pea silk.
And what's that?
That's typically silk harvested from the cocoons of wild or semi-wild moths after the moth has naturally completed its metamorphosis and emerged from the cocoon.
So the moth lives.
The moth lives. But remember what we said about wild silk? The emergence breaks the filament, so you get shorter fibers that need to be carded and spun, rather than reeled as one long thread. It results in a different type of fabric, often less lustrous.
So different methods with different ethical considerations and different end products?
Exactly. It's a complex issue with various viewpoints to consider.
Indeed. And as we bring this deep dive to a close, it's clear that silk is far more than just a luxurious fabric. It's a material with a history stretching back millennia.
Thousands of years.
Intertwined with the development of civilizations across the globe. Its unique properties, that shimmer, that strength, that feel, they've made it highly prized for everything from ancient imperial robes to, well, futuristic biomaterials.
Yeah, the range is incredible. From clothing to parachutes to potentially regenerating tendons. It's a testament to human ingenuity in harnessing nature, but also the remarkable potential found within the natural world itself.
It truly does make you look at that shimmering fabric with a completely different perspective. Unpacking its story reveals this incredible web of history, culture, science, and innovation. And as you mentioned, ethical considerations too. It definitely satisfies that craving for knowledge and those aha moments we talked about at the start.
Hopefully. And maybe it leaves you wondering, about the other seemingly ordinary materials that surround us every day.
Right. What other hidden depths and potential do they hold?
Exactly. Perhaps the future will see even more groundbreaking uses for silk. Maybe those genetically modified worms become pharmaceutical factories, or maybe sustainable wild silk production finds a way to truly rival traditional methods.
It definitely encourages you to look closer at the world around you and consider the extraordinary within the seemingly ordinary. What's the hidden story in a cotton thread or a piece of wood or plastic?
Precisely. Always more to discover.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into, well, the fascinating world of vitamins.
That's right. Those tiny organic molecules that are, absolutely essential for keeping us going.
Exactly. And the goal here is to really get a handle on what they are, where we get them, and why they matter so much, all without drowning in jargon.
We're aiming this at you, our listener. We've gone through a ton of info, mostly from Wikipedia's Big Vitamin page, actually.
Right, it's comprehensive.
It is, and we're trying to pull out the really interesting, useful bits for you, the key takeaways.
Okay, let's jump right in then. The big question first. What is a vitamin, really?
Okay, so fundamentally, a vitamin is an essential nutrient. And essential here means your body can't make enough of it by itself.
Can't make enough for survival.
Correct. So you have to get it from your diet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to note we're talking specifically about organic molecules here.
So not things like minerals, iron, calcium.
Oh.
Those aren't vitamins.
Nope. They're essential nutrients, too. Absolutely vital. But they're minerals. Same goes for essential fatty acids like omega-3s or essential amino acids.
Gotcha. Different categories.
Exactly. Vitamins are their own class, doing specific jobs, often as, like, helpers in metabolic reactions.
Okay, makes sense. How many are there then, these essential organic molecules?
Well, the major health organizations generally recognize 13 vitamins.
13. Okay.
Yeah, you got vitamin A, then the whole B complex group.
Oh, right. There are loads of B vitamins.
There are B1, thiamine, B2, riboflavin, B3, niacin, B5, pantothenic acid, B6, pyridoxine, B7, biotin, B9, folate, and B12, cobalamins.
Wow, okay. Keep going.
Then vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K.
That's the 13.
That's the main list. Although you might sometimes see choline mentioned as a 14th. It's kind of vitamin-like.
Interesting. 13 or 14. Now, you mentioned something else, vitamers. Sounds complex.
Yeah, it's a bit technical, but the idea is pretty straightforward. Most vitamins aren't just one single molecule. No, they're actually groups of related molecules, vitamers. And these related molecules all do basically the same job in the body.
Okay, so like variations on a theme.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Vitamin E is a great example.
Yeah.
When you talk about vitamin E, you're really talking about a family of 8 different molecules.
8.
Yep. 4 tocopherols and 4 decotrienols. They all count as vitamin E activity.
Huh. So vitamin E isn't just one thing, it's a team that actually helps picture it. So what do these different vitamin teams do inside us?
Well, they do a huge range of things, really diverse biochemical functions.
Likely.
Okay, so vitamin A, for instance, is super important for cell growth and differentiation, like telling cells what to become.
Yeah.
Tissues, too.
Building blocks kind of thing.
Yeah, and maintenance. Then you have vitamin D, which acts more like a hormone,
It's
actually.
a hormone.
Yeah, regulating minerals like calcium and phosphorus. Crucial for your bones, obviously, but other things, too.
Okay. A for building, D for bones. What about that big B complex?
The B vitamins are mostly the energy core. They're heavily involved in metabolism, helping your body get energy from food.
How do they do that?
They often work as enzyme cofactors, sometimes called coenzymes, or they're the precursors, the raw materials your body uses to make those coenzymes.
So like tools for the enzymes.
That's a good way to think of it.
Yeah.
Essential tools.
Yeah.
And then you got vitamin C and E. They're famous as antioxidants.
Right, protecting cells from damage.
Exactly. Damage from, free radicals, pollution, just normal metabolic processes.
So all essential, but all doing quite different jobs, which must mean getting the balance right is important. Too little or even too much.
Absolutely spot on. Deficiency is bad, obviously, but getting way too much excess intake can also cause illness.
Really, even with vitamins.
Yes. Though it's generally less of a worry with the water-soluble ones. That's the B vitamins and C.
Why is that?
Because your body tends to just flush out any excess pretty easily through urine. They don't really build up. But the fat-soluble ones, A, D, E, and K, those can be stored in your body, in your fat tissues and liver.
So they can accumulate.
They can. And taking really high doses, especially from supplements over a long time, can lead to problems. Hypervitaminosis, it's called.
Good to know. Be careful with the fat-soluble ones. Okay, nowadays we see vitamins everywhere, supplements in every pharmacy. But figuring this all out must have taken ages. Can we dig into the history a bit?
Oh, it's a fantastic story. It really spans centuries. People kind of knew food mattered for health way back.
Like ancient Egyptians.
Exactly. They figured out that liver helped with night blindness. We now know that's about vitamin A. But the real understanding often came from, difficult situations.
Like long sea voyages, scurvy and all that.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Those big voyages really highlighted what happens when you lack certain nutrients for a long time. Scurvy was brutal.
Lack of vitamin C, right?
Yep. Terrible symptoms, gums bleeding, wounds not healing, weakness, often fatal. Then in 1747, James Lind, a Scottish naval surgeon, did his famous experiment.
With the citrus fruits.
That's the one. Showed that lemons and oranges could prevent and cure scurvy. Took a while for the Royal Navy to make it standard practice, though.
But eventually they did, and sailors got called limes.
They did. Though, interestingly, you mentioned something earlier about limes.
Oh, yeah, that they switched to limes later, and they weren't as good.
You got it. In the 19th century, they started using West Indian limes, much less vitamin C than lemons. So scurvy sometimes popped up again, especially on Arctic trips. Shows how specific the nutrient source can be.
Wow. Trial and error, big time. What other breakthroughs happened?
The late 1800s, early 1900s were key. 1881, Nikolai Lunin in Russia did experiments with mice, fed some purified milk components, protein, fat, carbs.
Just the known stuff.
Right, they died. The ones fed whole milk thrived. He figured there must be tiny amounts of unknown essential stuff in milk. People were skeptical, though.
And berry. That was around then, too.
Yes, huge problem in Asia, linked to polished white rice. Takaki Kanehiro and the Japanese Navy noticed the diet link. Added meat, veggies, less berry. He thought it was protein, which was wrong, but he was on the right track about diet.
So getting closer, realizing there's more than just protein, fat, and carbs?
Exactly. Then Christian Eichmann, 1897, bit of luck involved. Noticed chickens fed polished rice got sick, like berry. Unpolished rice prevented it.
Ah, so something in the outer layer of the rice.
Precisely. That was huge.
Ah.
Then Frederick Hopkins, early 1900s, proposed the idea of accessory factors, tiny amounts of other things in food needed for health.
Accessory factors? Getting warmer. And this is when the names started appearing. Vitamine with an E.
Yes. So 1910, Umetaro Suzuki in Japan isolated something from rice bran that cured beriberi, called it abaric acid, then orzanin. But the translation of his work kind of buried the lead, so it didn't get huge recognition immediately in the West.
That's a shame.
Then, 1912, Casimir Funk, a Polish biochemist in London. He isolated a similar substance and coined the term vitamine.
Why vitamin?
He thought these vital things were chemical amines. Vital plus amine equals vitamine. He even guessed other deficiency diseases might be due to lack of other vitamins.
Clever. But wait, not all vitamins are amines, right?
Correct. And that led to the next step. Jack Cecil Drummond, 1920. As they found more, like vitamin A, which isn't an amine, he suggested dropping the final E.
Just vitamin.
Just vitamin.
Yeah.
To make it a broader term, not tied specifically to amines. And that's the name that stuck.
Fascinating how the name itself evolved with the science. And it sounds like this research was groundbreaking, Nobel Prizes even.
Oh, absolutely. Loads of Nobel Prizes recognized vitamin research, physiology or medicine, chemistry. It underscores how fundamental this was.
Which ones?
Well, the first was back in 1929, jointly to Eichmann and Hopkins for discovering vitamins in the first place. Then later prizes for isolating and figuring out A, B1, B2, C, D, K. Understanding how they work, like vitamin A in vision or K in blood clotting.
Really shows the impact. Okay, fast forward. Once these things were identified, I bet people got pretty excited. Marketing must have gone wild.
You bet. Huge enthusiasm. Cod liver oil for vitamin D, bottled sunshine, things like that.
I can imagine.
Yeah. Promoting foods known to be rich in specific vitamins, bananas, yeast cakes. It was partly about public health education, fighting deficiencies.
Makes sense. But maybe sometimes went a bit overboard.
Definitely. Sometimes led to interesting choices. Like with niacin vitamin B3, they wanted to add it to flour to fight pellagra.
Okay.
But nicotinic acid sounded too much like nicotine, public concern. So they rebranded it as niacin for public use.
Niacin, like nicotinic acid vitamin.
Exactly. Clever bit of PR.
Huh. And what about vitamania? I've heard that term.
Ah, yes. Coined by Robert Yoder in 1942. It describes that growing obsession with getting vitamins, often through pills, sometimes losing sight of just eating well.
Like more is always better.
Kind of that vibe. Exaggerated claims, thinking supplements were magic bullets even if you were healthy. Wonder Bread in the 50s is a classic example. Build strong bodies 8 ways because they added vitamins, fueling the vitamania.
Right. From fighting disease to maybe overdoing it. Okay, back to the science. You mentioned water-soluble and fat-soluble earlier. Let's nail down that difference.
Sure. It's really key to how your body handles them. Water-soluble. That's all the B vitamins and C. They dissolve in water.
Okay, easy enough.
So they travel around the body easily. And if you take in too much, your kidneys usually just filter out the excess into urine.
So they don't build up much?
Generally, no. Which also means you need to get them fairly regularly from your diet because you don't store large amounts.
Right. What about the fat-soluble ones?
A, D, E, and K. These guys need fat to be absorbed properly in your gut. And the big difference is your body can store them.
Where?
Mostly in your liver and your fatty tissues.
Ah. So deficiency might take longer to show up.
You can because you have reserves. But it also means, like we said before, taking huge amounts, especially supplements, can lead to buildup and potential toxicity over time, particularly A and D.
And conditions affecting fat absorption would be a problem.
Exactly. Things like cystic fibrosis can make it harder to absorb these fat-soluble vitamins. So water solubles are like sugar and water, pass through easily. Fat solubles are like oil, need fat, can stick around.
Great analogy. Clears it up.
Yeah.
Now, antivitamins. Sounds ominous.
Yeah, they're basically substances that interfere with vitamins.
Oh.
They can block absorption or stop the vitamin from doing its job once it's absorbed. Avidin is a famous example. It's a protein in raw egg whites. It binds really tightly to biotin, vitamin B7, and stops you absorbing it.
Seriously, raw eggs are bad for biotin.
Raw ones, yes. But cooking denatures the avidin, changes its shape so it doesn't bind biotin anymore. Cooked eggs are fine.
Phew. Okay. Any others?
Pyrithium is another. It's similar in structure to thiamine, B1, and can block enzymes that need thiamine.
Fascinating. Okay, so intake, diet is obviously key. But you mentioned other ways we get vitamins.
Yeah, diet's the main source for almost all of them. But there are cool exceptions. Your gut bacteria, for instance?
The microbiome.
Exactly. Those little guys actually produce some vitamin K and biotin for it.
Wow. What else?
Sunlight. Your skin can make vitamin D when it's exposed to UVB rays.
The sunshine vitamin, right?
That's it. And your body can convert some things into vitamins. Beta-carotene from carrots and stuff becomes vitamin A. Tryptophan, an amino acid, can become niacin.
So the body does some of the work.
Some, yeah. Oh, and B12 is interesting. It's almost exclusively found in animal products. Something for vegans to keep in mind.
B12, right. Important one. And food fortification.
Yeah, that's a big public health strategy. Adding vitamins like folic acid, niacin, vitamin A, iron sometimes, to staple foods like flour or salt to prevent widespread deficiencies.
So diet, sun, gut bugs, conversions, fortification, lots of routes. What happens when those fail? Deficiencies.
Right, and you can have primary or secondary deficiencies.
Meaning?
Primary is simple. You're just not getting enough in your diet over time. Secondary is more complex. You might be eating enough, but something else is wrong, like a digestive disorder stopping absorption or certain medications interfering. Even things like heavy alcohol use or smoking can affect how your body uses vitamins.
Okay. And how fast do these deficiencies develop? Does it vary?
Oh, hugely. Depends on the vitamin and how much your body stores.
Like the fat-soluble ones.
Exactly. A, D, and especially B12 can be stored quite well, mostly in the liver. So it might take months, even years, of low intake before you see real deficiency symptoms.
And the water-soluble ones.
Much faster.
Yeah.
Things like B3, niacin, and vitamin C aren't stored much. Deficiencies can show up in weeks or a few months if intake drops.
And it's not always about full-blown disease, right? You can just have low levels.
Absolutely. That's a really important point. Severe deficiency diseases like scurvy or beriberi are rare in many parts of the world now, thankfully.
But suboptimal levels might be common.
Yes. Surveys, like one done in the U.S. a while back, suggested many people not taking supplements weren't getting enough vitamin D or E, for example. So it's a spectrum.
Okay. And besides scurvy and beriberi, what are the other big deficiency diseases?
Well, pellagra is a classic niacin deficiency. The 3 Ds, dermatitis, diarrhea, dementia. Not good.
Definitely not.
Folate deficiency in pregnancy is linked to neural tube defects in babies, which is why folic acid fortification and supplements are so important. And rickets in children, osteomalacia in adults. That's vitamin D deficiency affecting bones.
Right, serious stuff. But we also talked about the other end getting too much. Hypervitaminosis. How risky is that, really? Especially with supplements being so popular.
It's a real risk, primarily with supplements, because it's very hard to overdose just from food. Especially with fat-soluble vitamins A and D, high levels are toxic.
So there are official upper limits?
Yes. Regulatory agencies set tolerable upper intake levels, or ULs, and poison control centers do get calls about vitamin overdoses, often accidental with kids, but sometimes adults taking massive doses.
And people might exceed these ULs without realizing.
Studies suggest some people taking high-dose supplements do exceed the ULs for certain vitamins, which could have negative effects long-term. So that more is better idea. Definitely not true here. Balance is key.
Balance. Got it. What about cooking? Does that wreck the vitamins in our food?
It can definitely affect them. It's not always bad. Sometimes cooking makes nutrients more available.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, often it leads to loss. Heat destroys some vitamins. Boiling is a big one for water-soluble vitamins like B's and C. They just leach out into the water.
So if you throw out the cooking water, you throw out the vitamins.
Pretty much. Air and light exposure can degrade them too, even just chopping veggies and letting them sit. Different vitamins have different sensitivities. Steaming or stir-frying is often better than boiling for retaining nutrients.
Good tips. Okay, recommendations. How much do we actually need? Is there like a global standard?
That would be convenient, wouldn't it? But no, there isn't complete international agreement.
Really? Why not?
Different countries, different agencies might interpret the science slightly differently or consider their own population's diet and health status.
Yeah.
So the recommended daily intake for, say, vitamin C might vary a bit depending on where you look.
Huh. So what terms should we know? RDA.
Right. In the U.S., you hear about EAR's estimated average requirements meeting needs for 50% of people.
Yeah.
Then RDA's recommended dietary allowances set higher to cover almost everyone, like 97, 98%.
Okay.
If there's not enough data for an RDA, they set an AI adequate intake based on observed intakes in healthy people. And the EU uses similar concepts, like PRI's population reference intakes.
And these numbers get updated.
They should, as research evolves. Though some of the U.S. data underlying current recommendations, apart from maybe calcium and D, is actually a couple of decades old now. So it's an ongoing process.
Good to remember. Now, the million-dollar question. Should most healthy people take a multivitamin just in case?
Yeah, that's the big one. And honestly, for generally healthy folks eating a decent, varied diet, the evidence for widespread benefits from routine multivitamin use, like preventing heart disease or cancer, is pretty limited.
Limited. Not zero, but not strong.
Exactly. Some large studies haven't found significant benefits. And worse, some research has even hinted at potential harms from high doses of certain supplements, like maybe vitamins A and E, though that's still debated.
What about specific things like vitamin D for bones?
Well, a big review looking at vitamin D and calcium for older adults didn't find clear evidence it reduced fracture risk in those living independently.
So the bottom line for most people is probably focus on diet first.
That seems to be the consensus from major health bodies. Supplements aren't a substitute for healthy eating. But, and this is important, there are specific groups who definitely benefit.
Like who?
Pregnant women needing folic acid, people on strict vegan diets needing B12, those with medical conditions affecting absorption, maybe older adults with poor appetite, they might need specific supplements, usually advised by a doctor.
So it's targeted, not necessarily universal.
Precisely. It's about individual needs, not a one-size-fits-all pill.
Okay. And how are these supplements regulated? Are they treated like drugs?
Generally, no. In the U.S. and many other places, they're regulated more like food. Meaning the manufacturers are responsible for safety, but they don't usually need pre-market approval, like drugs do from, say, the FDA.
So the FDA doesn't check them before they hit shelves?
Not typically for safety and effectiveness beforehand. They do set good manufacturing practices, GMPs, for quality and purity, and they can take action if a product is found to be unsafe or mislabeled after it's on the market. But it's less stringent than drug regulation.
So maybe look for brands that do third-party testing.
That can be a good idea, yes.
Yeah.
The EU has its own directive-setting rules. There are also pharmacopoeias setting quality standards for ingredients, but yeah, the oversight varies.
Good to know. Okay, last thing, those funny names. Why the gaps in the B vitamins? B4, B8, and why K for vitamin K?
Yeah, the naming has its quirks. The B vitamin gaps happen because things initially labeled as B vitamins were later discovered not to be essential vitamins after all.
Oh, like what?
Some turned out to be duplicates of existing B vitamins or substances the body could make itself, so they weren't essential from the diet. They got reclassified or dropped.
So science cleaning up its own categories.
Exactly. And vitamin K. The K is from the Danish word coagulation.
Coagulation.
Blood clotting. Yep. It was discovered by Danish scientists who found it was essential for blood clotting, so they used the K from coagulation. Simple as that. Shows how history and language play a role.
That's brilliant. Coagulation. Okay, well, this has been incredibly insightful. A real deep dive.
It's a huge topic.
It really is. So summing up, vitamins are absolutely vital. Organic things we mostly get from food, discovered through fascinating history, doing countless jobs in the body.
Right. And while getting enough is crucial, focusing on a balanced diet is generally the way to go for most people. Supplements have their place, but they aren't a magic fix, and more isn't always better.
Definitely. Understanding intake, deficiency, excess. It's all key for you, the listener.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought for you to ponder. Seeing how we went from just noticing scurvy to understanding the precise biochemistry of vitamin C, It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Wonder what?
What other everyday things, maybe aspects of our diet or lifestyle, hold similarly complex secrets we haven't fully unlocked yet? Nutrition science is still evolving. There's probably more amazing stuff to discover about these tiny molecules and how they affect us.